Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Business Lens on Rapid TV. I'm Faith Daffy Joseph, and as usual, we get to talk about what is going on in the world of business, finance, and the economy. So, yesterday was Nigeria's 65th anniversary. So, well, happy anniversary or happy Independence Day once more. I guess we'll be celebrating all through October. Well, celebrating because we're still here, okay? And according to the president, he gave a speech yesterday as per the usual custom, of course. And he highlighted several economic milestones of his administration. So we're going to talk about that, right, on the other side, as we look at, what he said, check it, of course, with everything that has actually gone on, and just put it side by side. Okay. Macroeconomic indices are stabilizing. Is it trickling down? So that's another question that I'll be asking my analysts per usual. And then we're also going to be talking about the NNPC and Dangote signing a 2-year crude oil deal and what that means actually also for the oil industry. And so talking about the oil industry, we know that Pengasing has now called off its strike, but the aftermath of the result of that strike, the impact of that strike remains, and we're going to talk about that as well. So I turn now to my analysts, of course, to help us unpack all of these stories, starting, of course, Daniel Efa, our global financial market analyst, and Isabella, our economist here. Welcome to the show, guys. Happy Independence.
Happy Independence to you.
Okay. Did you catch the president's speech?
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. But let's talk about what's going on with Pengasing and the NNPC, right? So Pengasing announced a halt to their strike. They said that, well, what they're doing is that it's temporary. According to Pengasing, they said that the federal government has intervened. So there's a temporary truce. But if the issues are not addressed, they can return to the strike. So we should not relax. It's not over. But the main issue here is according to them, the sacking of union members and replacing of Nigerian workers with foreign nationals. Of course, Dangote refinery has come out to vehemently deny that and say that the layoffs that they had was operational and organizational stuff, and it didn't have anything to do with members. But of course, this is very suspect if we consider Dangote's the timing, and of course Dangote's relationship, Dangote's refinery relationship with union members. So not too long ago was Newpeng, and then you have this. So Pengasing is saying that they're still going to have this industrial action if all the issues are not resolved. The federal government has, intervened and said that, everybody, let's come to drawing board. Let's see how we can resolve this. But the losses, I want to go through the losses with you very quickly because this is huge. When they had this, the shutdown, it led to shutdown of major oil terminals, gas plants, and power facilities. This led to the deferment of 283,000 barrels of crude oil per day and 1.7 billion standard cubic feet of gas. So basically, from the two biggest revenue streams that we have, because of the downing of tools of Pengasing, this was the result. And this is something that was put out by the NNPC. So the group chief executive officer, that's Bio Jewelry, he was the one who said that because of this 3-day strike alone, right, 16% oil production, cut, and 30% gas market losses just for 3 days. And so the nation suffered a 20% power supply shortfall as well. Let's talk about this. It's huge. Pengasing basically held the nation to ransom because Dangote laid off their staff or their union members. Is this supposed to be normal?
Well, the discussion I had over this is that at what point in time in the recent history of Nigeria has union or unionism actually been something very, very positive. I'm not saying that unionism is not good. I'm saying that in the Nigerian context, if you look at the union or what unionism has achieved, are we able to say that there have been a lot of positives? Because I was also arguing with Daniel, I think that was earlier this week, because he's on the side of the union, and I was telling him that fine, the union theoretically in what it stands for makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to Nigeria, you find out that where we start having progress, most times, then you have unions coming up and standing up and saying, no, it should be like this. There's a way you can fight for your rights, okay, that you will not disrupt and actually hamper the growth of a particular sector. Where is the unionism on salaries of bankers? Where is the unionism on contract staffs in banks? Where is the unionism on education? Where is the unionism on health? That, the standard of health is not... You see, there are so many places that we can actually practice unionism that you will see that the Nigerian citizens will be at your back. But now somebody brings in billions of dollars, builds one of the biggest refineries in the world, is operating it, is progressing. We are seeing the progress. I'm not a Dangote person, okay? We're seeing the progress. If for any reason you have your grievances, I think that striking should not be like, when you play cards, you have general market, pick 2, pick 5, then I think striking is your joker. It should be the last thing you should be thinking
last
about.
resort.
But now in Nigeria, it has become the first thing.
And then the strike that Pengassin had, it wasn't just, let's down tools in Dangote refinery, down tools nationwide.
Exactly.
What right do they have to have to hold the entire nation to ransom? Because they fired their union members in refinery.
And they now shut down all the markets in Abuja.
Yeah, but how will they get their voice heard if they don't?
They should hold us to ransom because of a few members.
Hold on. It doesn't. It's not a Nigerian thing. We still had earlier this year, last year, train workers went on strike in the UK.
Because
same thing. Because of poor treatment, welfare. You see welfare. Same thing in France.
But I'm sure a whole lot would have happened.
Train system is almost an essential. It's an essential service in the UK. Same thing in France. In fact, France, they even went all out. It became almost violent. What am I trying to say? The model.
That's apples and oranges.
No. What am I trying to say is that those are even countries that you can easily get the courts, right, to move faster, right, on employee labor conversations. In this part of the world, it is terrible, right? We have businesses in Nigeria owned by foreigners that treat Nigerian workers terribly. It's because we don't get a lot of this, and that's because over time their voices have not really been heard. That's why people have now stuck to the fact that it is now a modus operandi. They just set a certain example of the banking sector. That is a terrible place that unions should be more involved in. Right? You said the health sector. There is. We see what ASU does with the education sector.
Yeah.
In the health sector, for example, up until over 7 months, unions in the primary health care sector were on strike. And they don't offer health services, but nobody said anything because they are not relevant. Again, whatever, if the primary health care is off, it is the people that are affected at the lower cadre of the economy. So nobody said anything. Right? So if Pengassin is saying our employees have been badly treated, they have a right to. And if the business owner is not saying anything, they should use any means necessary to get the thing done. Now, as soon as they shut it down, is everybody not suddenly talking? Everybody's suddenly talking, and that is how it should be. That is why unions were set in the first place. See, there's always a thin line. I understand the notion, fantastic, 20 billion investment, fantastic. But there is a thin line between business profitability and employee welfare. It's a very, very thin line.
Hold on.
The question is, what has been solved now with this strike?
It has been solved. According to what we read, 800 staff. According to what we read, the 800 staffs, right, according to Dangote, are going to be redeployed into other sections of
the conversations are ongoing. So
exactly.
It's not being solved, which is why Pengassin is saying it's not settled yet.
Exactly.
Don't relax.
Exactly.
But what I'm saying is, Pengassin, your issue was with Dangote refinery, right?
Yeah.
But you decided that, because a private company, right, is treating your staff like this, the entire nation, has to suffer. So basically, they did not just shut down operations and say, union members still remaining with Dangote do not work. They're saying union members all over the country do not work. See, if you look at all of you need to go through the list of the things that suffered.
Members.
Wait, hold on. There was missed crude lifting and disrupted gas sales, right, because of this. And then he also said that at the brass terminal, for instance, there was a loading of an NNPC cargo that was close to completion. It was now stopped because of that, attracting demurrage costs. So basically what it means is that if you have a problem with a private organization, you know what? Hold the entire nation to ransom. Is that the best way to deal with this?
The way you're portraying it, right, is a very...
It's the fact.
Of course, it's perception. What if the perception also is... Hold on. What if I'm also saying what you just said, in the sense that Pengassin simply... I don't call solidarity for its members, right? That was its members across board also went on strike in solidarity with the guys
that the nation.
That was exactly
but the fact is that it cost the nation.
Hold on, it will cost. It must cost the nation.
Another private firm apart from Dangote. Have you seen this before?
As far as Pengassin, as far as
or a modular refinery that were not treating their staff well, and because of that, they went on strike in the operation.
They were not just treated. This is not the issue. The issue is they were not just treated not well, because according to what we are now hearing, these staffs they don't even have basic equipment. According to what the staffs are saying, apart from them not being treated, they were also laid off unjustly. Of which even the refinery is not justifying that. That is even an issue. That is even another case. Whatever the cause of the matter is, the fact that we cannot say unions should not work within their rights. And what they simply did is that every member in that union says, I am not going to work until my 800 fellow members that were unjustly laid off are also are reinstated, or their welfare is sorted out. And that is what they did. If that implies that the nation is shut down in quotes, then so be it.
Nobody is saying that they shouldn't.
We should all suffer because of 3,000 Pengassin staff.
That's why would you shut down the whole country?
They did not shut. They shut down where they work. If there they work
you see when the conversation will change.
Yes,
is where, for example,
where they work.
Is where, for example, you have organizations that also are very, very important to the economy.
Yeah.
Do the same thing. Then you see that this conversation would flip on its head. For example, if it's
20%
something
of
that
revenue
has to do with the security of the country, or something that has to do with food, then suddenly everybody is saying, no, this doesn't make sense. It's not right at all. I feel that unions should exercise their rights, but also there's something greater than their rights, which is to curtail that right to wherever the problem is coming from, and not at every okay, you and I and everybody is student. Now, what wrong did we do for them at the end of the day to now hamper our? They are saying that somebody is disrupting the welfare of their people.
Yeah.
Then they now go on strike to disrupt the welfare of other people.
No,
is that the solution?
But
because that's what they did.
Okay, so
now some businesses could not operate during that time because they depend solely on fuel. I told you now, I'm not going to queue for any fuel. I rather just leave my car at home and stay at home and not work, because I will not be queuing for fuel in 2025. So whatever they are doing, they also need to think that their actions can also affect other people by what they are doing.
That is why it is an industrial action. That is the goal of the action. The goal of the action is to influence a decision to be made. It is to force people's hands. How do I force your hand if I don't take that move? Just like what you just said now. It's just like saying, so because I don't have a kid or a child in the university, as you can go on strike for all I care. That's what it means.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if at the end of the day every sector decides to toe this line, we will not be working in Nigeria.
No.
Because before you know it now, if Keke Association has problem, they'll block airport route and nobody will go. So if everybody is doing this, we will not go forward as a nation. That's why I said that there's something higher than the right of the unions, which is the collective Commonwealth rights of Nigerians.
That was why I cited.
The court is there.
Yeah.
They can start from there. You talked about UK, you talked about France.
Yes.
I am extremely sure that strike was not the first thing on their card.
That was what they did first.
No,
they gave warnings. They gave warnings. They also gave warnings.
Which ones?
They gave warnings before they went on strike.
They gave a 24 hours.
24 hours warning. That
it's warning because you know what? Because you know why? You know why? It was on a Sunday, right? And they got a brief that Dangote was going to get injunctions against them on a Monday, and they made the move. See, the whole idea of unions, it is just like what's happening in the US, for example. The last time there was a government shutdown, everybody was okay. 35, 20 days, 30 days, it was going on right until workers, the air services, air service workers started saying they're going to be taking, that they're feeling sick. They're calling sick leave. They're calling sick leave. That is when they start. That was when the government decided to come back and solve it. So it is always about someone saying, this is a union. So why are we not focusing on the real issue why they went on? Because then Pegasus did not decide to go on strike. Why are we not focusing on the real issue? And that is what is my own concern. Why did everybody just leave the employee welfare conversation, which is the real issues? We have employee welfare. In fact, I am feeling this should probably would have been a wake-up call to start conversations around every sector that we've had. I will have issues with employee welfare. That is what it should be the real issues. Not about what we will lose things. It is part of it.
So
but
every union has to hold the nation to ransom. Hold on.
Yeah.
It is a nation to ransom. I just told you what it costs Nigeria, right? 16% of national oil production. We are a nation looking for revenue, right? 30% of marketed gas, and then you also have 20% of electricity supply. And this is for 1 day, 24 hours. So if you extrapolate that for the 3 days that they went on strike, you understand how much was actually lost.
They don't care.
And there was also demurrage cost and all of that.
Care.
So basically you're advocating that, okay, because for a union, maybe 800 of your members were aggrieved. So you know what? The entire nation has to suffer.
Million, yeah. Throw away the baby and the bathwater. That's the one.
That's what you're advocating.
What I'm simply saying is, why not ensure that employee welfare is a big issue?
Why can't you do that?
How would they have done that?
We agree.
In the same Nigeria, we know how would they have done that. The same way you see Nigerians, you see how some people are saying, no, because of his 20 billion investment, he has to be treated like a gold star. That's the conversation that we're having.
The conversation we are having is that there are a whole lot of other sectors that will need this unionism for them to go and practice it there. But when you see that, this is a big, identified organization, and it will give us a whole lot of, spotlight, to be able to have, very big conversations, that in a way has swayed the way they would have reacted if it was a refinery with just 500 staff and they laid off 10. At the end of the day, we all went to university. They say injustice done to one is injustice done to all.
Exactly.
So the same yardstick you use, if one person was treated misjustly or unjustly, should be the same way you will treat the 800. That's what I'm saying. That there is some level of perceived bias because it is Dangote or because it is a big refinery. If this had happened in a smaller refinery, are we going to see this level of reaction from Pengassin to shut the whole nation down, even if it is one person that was unjustly treated? You and me know that this is not going to be the situation.
Okay, so
if you want to have conversation about welfare,
it is not a Nigerian thing.
If we want to have a conversation about employee welfare, right? This transcends the oil and gas sector. What it also means is that if you want to talk about employee welfare, it should be a conversation that you're having across board, not just saying, oh, you know what, this happens to our members now, so that's it. How many times has the NLC talked about employee welfare, unless they're talking about, minimum wage? Let's leave that because of time. So the NNPC and Dangote, they have signed a 2-year crude deal supply agreement. No, that's the NNPC. Okay. NNPC was the one complaining about Pengassin. See, this is not concern us, but this is what it costs us.
Arguing with Daniel, then I went to
NNPC was not complaining that, see, you and Dangote had issues, but this is what it now costs us as the NNPC, right? But now they've signed, this 2-year crude deal to make sure that Dangote has a supply for 2 years. I mean, to sign is easy. Let's just hope that they can do that. About 82 million barrels of crude have been allocated from October 2024 till now. And so about 49.3 million barrels of that was sold in Naira to the refinery. So basically, yes, there's this crude for Naira sales, but it's not for everything. So it's about 60% of it. So they have now signed to extend. I mean, of course, the federal government said it was going to be in perpetuity, so there's no termination point. But they've signed this. I don't know why there's now a 2-year deal when you know that's.
Of course. It's the dynamics which can possibly change. Particularly when it comes to the fact that Dangote Refinery itself is trying to expand, right? So there might be a need to probably increase. Who also knows? We might have also increased our own supply also of crude that might have given us more room to give more for local refineries. So yeah, it's a 2 years. The real deal about signing 2-year deal is not even that you sign a 2 year. It's the fact that the supply will be constant, because what caused this conversation in the first place was Dangote threatening not to sell petrol products. Exactly. So that is the issue. So I think that can be solved. I think it's a good deal.
Until Pengassin goes on strike.
Another thing I think is, you remember there was this kind of subsidy on the dollar before, and giving giving maybe Dangote some kind of incentives in subsidized dollars, created a gap between the Naira and the USD. Okay, but now, to a very large extent, whether you're buying in Naira or buying in dollars, there's practically one exchange rate. I know that if you say, it doesn't matter, I know it's going to put pressure on the Naira, I know, but I'm just saying that there is a kind of a difference between when dollar was being subsidized and now, you know, when you relate it to Dangote buying crude oil from Nigeria and all that. So that in itself is also another discussion, that Dangote buying now in Naira or buying in dollars, you know, doesn't really have that much gap compared to maybe 4 years ago or something.
Even though the dynamics of that transaction is still very unclear, because Dangote practically only sells aviation fuel, petrol, maybe diesel. What of the other components?
Most of the other components, of course, are also there. They've talked about selling that to some manufacturing, companies in Nigeria to be able to do some things. You just have to see what makes the news. Is this because it's essential for Nigeria, but the other aspects of it are ongoing. Daniel, do not worry about that.
You want to buy petrol?
Anyway, stay with us on Rapid TV. The business let's continue shortly after this. We'll get to look at the president's speech detailing his achievement and macroeconomic stability for Independence Day. Stay here.
Fellow Nigerians, we are racing against time. We must build the road we need, repair the ones that have become descriptive, and construct the schools our children will attend, and the hospitals that will care for our people. We have to plan for the generations that will come after us. We do not have enough electricity to power our industries, our homes today. All the resources to repair our deteriorating roads, building seaports, railroads, and international airports comparable to the best in the world, because we failed to make the necessary investment decades ago. Our administration is setting things right now. I'm pleased to report that we have finally turned the corner. The worst is over, I say. Yesterday's pains are giving way to relief. I salute your endurance, support, and understanding. I will continue to work for you and justify the confidence you repose in me to steer the ship of our nation to a safer harbor. Under our leadership, our economy is recovering fast, and the reforms we started over 2 years ago are delivering tangible results.
All right, that was President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for Independence Day speech yesterday, talking about the achievements of his administration. He talked about Nigerians having turned a corner. He says the worst is over, and he talked about how macroeconomic reforms have now, fully taking effects. Anyway, let's talk about this. All right, so let me come back to my analyst. The president talked about so many things. I mean, if we watch through to the end of that speech, you would have seen where he started to break down the macroeconomic reforms and, the progress that has been made so far. He talked about the Naira stabilizing. That is something that we definitely can all attest to, saying that there is hardly a difference between the parallel markets and the official market. So basically, maybe the retail and the wholesale market, if you want to look at that. And then he also talked about oil production. Well, he said it was 1.68 million. Okay. That's what the president said. Well, we have increased our production. We have been able to beat the OPEC quota a few times this year, but it's been about 1.5 something million barrels. Well, he said 1.68 million. Well, we can look at that. And then he also now mentioned how our tax to GDP ratio has not risen from 13.5% to less than 10%, and talked about external reserves is about $42.03 billion. That is definitely true. The CBN released those figures, especially during the last MPC meeting. And then he talked about non-oil revenue attaining over 20 trillion, about 20.9 trillion. So he is very right where that is concerned. It's a 411% higher than the amount raised in May 2023. So he talked about a lot of things, but debt to service ratio, he says that is 97%, from 97% is now below 50%. Well, from the AFDB figures that we have for last year, December, it's about 75%. So we haven't gotten, I've tried to look for the new figures from the DMO, but revenue, we haven't seen that.
The DMO has not been releasing figures
recently. Right. So even the figure I'm quoting for you is from the AFDB. So the World Bank is positing that you should be looking at less than 25%, but this is where we are. So let's talk about, some of these reforms that, he's talking about. He's saying that we've turned a corner and the West is over. Do you agree with that? Because there are also experts that feel like, well, Nigeria is moving to that stability range that even you had the DG for the WTO saying that the president, when you look at macroeconomic indices, there's a lot of stability right now. So is it wrong to say that the West is over and we're turning a corner?
To be very objective, from my own point of view, I would say that there is actually some facts, in what Mr. President said. But I would like to say this in comparison because if we to look post-2015, pre-2015, and also pre-2023, we use that as the basis for comparison, then it might be a different conversation. But if you're comparing between
May 2023,
and now, I would say that truly things are beginning to, inflation is slowing down. We are now at like a plateau where we expect maybe things to now start gradually going down. But if we are to have the conversation of, for example, exchange rates, pre-2023, pre-2015, compared to today, you see that we still have a long way off. If we have to compare the food prices, between now and 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 2 years ago, it's a different conversation. So what Mr. President said is true, but if we expand the discussion, then the discussion might change. So objectively, I would say that according to what he said, we've turned the corner and the worst is over. So what I expect is that Nigeria should now be on the race towards recovering the last 15, 20 years and going back to the highest growing economy, or top 3 growing economy as it was about a couple of years ago, that's like a decade ago. That is what should now be our target. We have put aside a whole lot of stress and issues and confusion. All manner of stuff are being quietened. Now the goal is singular for Nigeria to become what it had always been known as, which is the giant of Africa.
So for me, I think that I don't know how fast recovery should look like in terms of our own context, based on how bad it was. But I think where we are, I think is the barest minimum that we should be. We cannot. I think that the 8 years preceding president's tenure was just full of chaos. I think that chaos mixed with what's called financial recklessness, monetary instability again,
and turmeric.
And so many chaotic approach, right? Plus the COVID-19, right? If you had a government that wasn't really necessarily financially what they call it, stable, right? Before COVID-19, most countries in the world really collapsed. So practically, they are trying to pick that up. So when you add those two conversations together, I think the barest minimum is first anybody coming in to stabilize the ship. I think we should. What is even key for me, right, in this conversation is the fact that we are it's all those conversations, all those 12 points still give a blanket view of how the Nigerian economy actually is, right? We've done all those, we've increased debt, we've done fiscal stability. What's the essence of fiscal stability if it's not for the welfare of the people? Are Nigerians happier than the
which is where I'm going to now. Have we seen a trickle down? Because what the president has done, what the reforms have been about macroeconomic indices, but if you look at the micro aspect of it, there's not really been a trickle down. But he's saying that the worst is over and we've turned the corner.
Yeah.
Does it mean that we cannot expect to start seeing that trickle down now? You know, will it translate?
I think this is kind of October 1 statements we'll be getting. I think the only has one left before his administration is over. I think this is just the next one, and I think most likely it's going to be the same thing. We've done.
You don't think we've turned the corner?
Another extra 5 things that are still blanket, and it's because of the way data is gathered in Nigeria. You know, in the US, for example, you can basically almost say, because of the jobs report, for example, you can almost say you've added 12 million jobs because there is a data that captures that. And for Nigeria, there is none like that. So you can just be telling us what you've actually done or what you are planning to do as an achievement, if it doesn't necessarily have a direct effect, right? I think what should have been done, for example, is just go to the streets. Don't tell us who you are. Do a random check, right? 1,000 people, 5,000 Nigerians, random all across 36 states. I ask them, are you happier, right? Whatever they say should give you an idea of whatever you're doing right or wrong. And that's the essence of governance. If governance doesn't necessarily get to the people, any other thing you tell me about your budget, about how sweetened you've done it, it doesn't necessarily mean anything if it doesn't get to me. And that is the problem, because now they have more money, right? What has been more money done for the Nigerian people? That is why I just look
so
at it.
So you don't believe that we've turned the corner and that
we've only stabilized, which is the barest minimum. It was a chaotic up. Anybody could have stabilized. What I'm saying is,
well, most of the chaos was caused by
exactly.
May, right?
Exactly. See, we came in. What was the problem? We're coming off the back of a CBN governor that couldn't handle a Naira redesign, right? So if a CBN governor should come in that knows his job would have done what the current CBN is doing. So what I'm saying is that the real work in the last 2 years, it has not necessarily started. What we've done is stabilize, which is what the barest minimum you would do if you bring a patient to you in the hospital and the patient is dying or is suffering from a very serious injury. Your first thing you have to do is to stabilize the patient. Does that mean you've done your work? Should the family of the patient start celebrating? Oh, thank God you've saved it. If not, you've only solved the basic.
Well, especially maybe when you came, you gave the patient some sort of attack. You're the one who
you see exactly.
Well, let's
fell from stretcher.
Well, you made a very key point when you talked about the target of comparison, right? Because if you look at the president's speech, most of his comparison was targeted towards 2023, May 2023. And like I said, most of the chaos that happened at the time was from this administration. Announcing subsidy was gone on the first day, and also, embarking on the valuation of the currency, taking out subsidy from electricity. A lot of all of the chaos started then. So yes, you've stabilized to that point. But if you look at our debt is ballooning and ballooning and ballooning. In fact, our debt is way more now than it has ever been, even though we earn way more money. Well, about 149.39 trillion. That is our debt, right? But if you look at the comparison and you say, even if it is pre-2023, right? We're not there.
No.
Not to not talk of pre-2015 when we're seen as one of the fastest growing economies in the world, or emerging economies in the world. So should we now be looking at 2023 as our base year, as our target for, things are getting better now from May 2023, or should it be before then?
No, it should be the last time we had a major income increment, because you cannot compare standard of living and isolate income. Like someone said, he said everything is increasing in Nigeria apart from my salary. Everything is going on. So if we want to compare it objectively, we'll look at what was the average salary in 2014. What is the average salary today? You can use any other currency to weigh it so that you can have, like, when you do experiment, you can have a control.
Yeah.
Then you now come to 2025 and say, okay, what is the average salary now? I can tell you off the top of my head that people were earning between 25 to 30,000, 40,000 in 2014. These same people are now earning 50, 60,000, 70,000. So you look at the increase, you can say that it's not up to 100%, or at most 100%. But what about things, the cost of things between 2014 and 2025?
Naira has been devalued way more than that.
At least 400%. At least 400%. If you look at the cost, or let me say the value of the Naira, because we're coming from, let's say, 400, 300, 400.
In 20.
Yeah, and now we are in 1.4 of recent, you know. So if we're doing that comparison, then yes, we still have a long way to go. And like Daniel also said, there's something I've been clamoring for years. We've spoken about it on radio severally, is that any country that wants to actually progress, there must be data. Because data is the basis in which you would either start or stop something. And how do you get data if you don't know who is in the country? So the first thing is, we need to first of all have a social security. Yeah. Who is a Nigerian? Where are they? Like the same thing I said concerning the tax, that how do you know? You don't even know me. The government does not know me. Do you know me? Do you know how much I earn? Do you know where I work? I'm not talking about me personally. I'm saying generally. Does government know where everybody works? Is it documented somewhere? It's not. That is why even when you go to the bank to open an account, they will tell you that you can use any statement of account. What's it called? Bill. Yeah. That they expect that your name might not be on it. Now, do they update that record? No. The same address you have been using your bank for 10 years is what is still there. And that is the same reason why people are already saying that this tax issue is not the problem for Nigeria. That, okay, a whole lot of money has come in, like you said, from crude oil and all that, from loans. What has been done? Is more money the problem? Is more money the problem, really? Is it going to solve any other thing?
I mean, if you think about what the former Minister for Finance used to say then, that, Nigeria has a revenue problem, you know, and all that. Now you're looking at all the revenue we're getting. Do we really have a revenue problem? Let me wrap up with you, Daniel.
So at the end of the day, I think that from the 12 points, President also said that we are now a net exporter, and also 8 million households. Still part of my conversation.
Got 25,000.
Net exporter, because we now export more products, particularly crude oil. Because if you look at the numbers in dollars, it is the crude oil products. Yeah. Or does it also not mean that we now started importing less because importing exactly to afford
cannot afford it anymore.
So when we look at these things, we need to critically look at it. Has to trickle down. Same thing, 8 million households. Extremely vague. What are 8 million households? You have 10,000 in different tranches. What would that do to them? That is not what we're talking about. Improving infrastructure. In the 12 agenda, you also mentioned the coastal highways. What are the coastal highways? You have building coastal highway across your coast, but in
Lagos to Abuja,
terrible roads. So
okay, because of time, we'll leave it here. There's always time to dissect and look at some more of the president's speech. But what is very important is that, yes, as much as we have macroeconomic stability, we have to have it translate and trickle down to the common man on the streets. That is the only time, the president can say we've turned the corner, but does the average man on the streets think that we've turned the corner and that the worst is over? I think that is the most important question. Exactly. Thank you so much, as always, for your contribution. So, Rapid TV, we have news on the other side of the hour. Okay, I will do this again, of course, on Monday. My name is Faith Joseph. Good morning.